Stop for a second. Think about the last conversation that didn't go the way you wanted. Maybe you said something and the room went quiet. Maybe someone agreed with you in the meeting, but then did the exact opposite afterward. Maybe you walked away from a first impression feeling like you blew it, and you had no idea why. Here's what nobody told you. That wasn't bad luck. That was psychology. Every single interaction you have, every handshake, every tense email, every moment someone trusts you or doesn't, follows invisible psychological patterns. Patterns that are running right now in every room you walk into, in every conversation you're having. Most people never see them, but once you do, everything changes. The most magnetic people you've ever met, the ones who walk into a room and instantly own it, the ones who make you feel genuinely seen after 5 minutes of conversation, the ones who somehow always get the yes. They're not operating on charm alone. They've cracked the code on how human beings actually think, feel, and connect. And here's the part that should genuinely excite you. This is learnable. Every single piece of it. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about finally understanding who people are, including yourself, so you can show up in every relationship, every conversation, and every room with real confidence, real connection, and real influence. By the time you finish this, you won't just understand people better. You'll understand yourself better, and that changes everything. Let's go. Chapter 1. The hidden psychology behind every human interaction. You're already playing a game you didn't sign up for. Every conversation you have, every relationship you navigate, every moment where someone decides to trust you or keep their distance, all of it is governed by deep psychological forces that most people never consciously recognize. These aren't soft, abstract ideas. They're wired into your brain at a hardware level, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. And the wild thing, they're happening whether you're aware of them or not. The question is, do you want to keep running on autopilot, or do you want to actually understand what's going on under the hood? Let's start with the 5 hidden principles that are shaping literally every interaction you have. The first principle, your brain is a threat scanner. Within the first few seconds of meeting someone new, your brain is quietly running a full security check. Not a conscious one, an automatic one. Before you've exchanged a single word, your mind is already asking, is this person safe? Are they with me or against me? Where do they rank compared to me? Your amygdala, think of it as your brain's internal alarm system, is constantly sweeping for social danger signals, rejection, humiliation, exclusion, being left out of the group. These aren't just uncomfortable feelings. To your ancient brain, they register as genuine survival threats. This is why first impressions hit so hard and stick so long. Your brain makes a call about someone before your rational mind has even clocked in for the day. But here's where it gets powerful for you. Once you understand that every person you meet is unconsciously asking, am I safe with this person? You can deliberately answer that question for them. Through your body language, your tone, your eye contact, your openness, you can signal safety before you say a single meaningful word. That's not manipulation. That's emotional intelligence in action, and it's the foundation of every genuinely influential person you've ever admired. The second principle, the give first rule. Humans are hardwired to return favors, not because their mom told them to, because reciprocity is one of the oldest survival mechanisms in our social DNA. When someone gives you something, even something small, even something you didn't ask for, your brain creates what feels like a psychological debt, a pull toward giving something back. This is so deeply embedded in us that it works even when the gift is tiny, even when it's from a stranger, and even when you consciously recognize what's happening. Socially intelligent people understand this, and they use it the right way. They give first, not to manipulate, but to genuinely add value before they ask for anything in return. They share a useful insight. They offer a real compliment. They give their full, undivided attention in a world where that's increasingly rare, and in doing so, they set off positive cycles that build rapport and trust naturally over time. Think about the people in your life who feel effortless to be around. Chances are they're consistent givers, not martyrs, not pushovers, givers. There's a reason they attract loyalty like a magnet. The third principle, you are wired to follow the crowd. Here's something uncomfortable. You are not as independent in your choices as you think you are. Humans are deeply social creatures, and one of our most hardwired instincts is to look at what other people are doing before deciding what we should do, especially in unfamiliar situations. This is called social proof, and it's one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. It's why a restaurant with a line outside feels more appealing than an empty one. It's why you trust a product with 1,000 reviews more than one with 5. It's why social movements can catch fire seemingly overnight. Your brain is constantly asking, what are people like me doing here? And whatever the answer is, it pulls your behavior in that direction. Once you understand this, you can start using it intentionally, not to trick people, but to shape environments where positive, constructive behaviors become the natural default. You can highlight examples of the behavior you want to see. You can become someone others genuinely want to model themselves after. That's real influence. The fourth principle, status, is always being negotiated. Every interaction you have contains an invisible subtext. Underneath the actual words, two people are always signaling and reading where each of them stands in the social landscape. This isn't about being power-hungry or arrogant. Status is simply how humans coordinate in groups. It determines who leads, who defers, whose ideas get taken seriously. And the signals are subtle but constant. High-status behaviors, calm, deliberate speech, comfortable stillness, genuine interest in others without needing their approval, taking up appropriate space without aggression, low-status behaviors, nervous fidgeting, constant validation-seeking, over-apologizing, rushing to fill silence. The beautiful part? You can consciously choose which signals you send. You can train yourself to project the level of groundedness and confidence that serves your relationships and your goals, without pretending to be anyone you're not. The fifth principle, emotions are contagious. You've felt this before. You walk into a room where someone is anxious and tense, and within minutes, your shoulders are up around your ears. Or you spend an hour with someone who's genuinely lit up about life, and you leave the conversation feeling like anything is possible. That's not coincidence. Emotions literally spread from person to person through a neurological process called emotional contagion. Your brain has mirror neurons that automatically tune into the emotional states of the people around you and begin to replicate them. This means your emotional state is never just personal. It ripples outward and affects every person in your orbit. The most emotionally intelligent people in any room understand this. They manage their own state first, and then use that managed state to stabilize, energize, or uplift the people around them. These 5 principles aren't just fascinating psychology trivia. They're the operating system running beneath every conversation, every relationship, every moment of connection or disconnection you've ever experienced. The difference between people who seem effortlessly magnetic and everyone else isn't talent. It's awareness. They've simply learned to see what most people miss. Chapter 2: Decoding the Social Brain: How You're Wired for Connection. Here's something that will permanently change how you think about yourself. Your brain is not primarily a thinking machine. It's a social machine. Every major system in your brain, every circuit, every chemical, every evolutionary upgrade over hundreds of thousands of years didn't develop just to help you solve math problems or remember where you parked your car. It developed to help you navigate the most complex environment humans have ever faced: other humans. Understanding how your social brain actually works isn't just intellectually interesting. It's the master key to understanding why you react the way you do, why certain people drain you and others energize you, and, most importantly, how you can deliberately develop the social intelligence that changes every area of your life. Your brain's CEO and why it keeps going. Offline, right behind your forehead, sits the prefrontal cortex. Think of it as the most sophisticated part of your mental operating system. This is where complex social reasoning happens, where you read between the lines of a conversation, where you stop yourself from saying the thing you'll regret later, where you navigate the delicate choreography of a difficult discussion without blowing it up. When your prefrontal cortex is fully online, you're at your social best. You're thoughtful, perceptive, emotionally regulated, and able to see situations from multiple angles simultaneously. But here's the problem. It's also the most energy-expensive part of your brain, and it's the first thing to go offline when you're tired, stressed, overwhelmed, or running on too little sleep. You've seen this happen. Maybe you said something sharp in an argument that you never would have said on a good day. Maybe you fumbled a conversation that should have been easy because you were running on fumes. Maybe you watched someone you respect completely lose their composure under pressure and wondered what happened to them. What happened was simple. Their CEO stepped out, and without that oversight, the more reactive, primitive parts of the brain took over. The practical implication for you is enormous. If you want to show up at your social best, in the meetings that matter, the conversations that count, the relationships that define your life, you have to treat your mental energy as a non-negotiable resource. Sleep isn't laziness. Stress management isn't self-indulgence. Strategic recovery between intense social interactions isn't weakness. These are the foundations of sustainable social intelligence. You cannot think your way to better relationships on an empty tank. Full stop. Mirror neurons, the bridge between you and everyone else. Somewhere inside your brain right now, there are specialized cells called mirror neurons doing something almost miraculous. They fire not just when you perform an action or feel an emotion, but when you observe someone else doing it. This is the neurological foundation of empathy. When your friend tells you about a painful breakup and you feel a tug in your chest, that's your mirror neurons doing their job, simulating their experience inside your own brain so you can genuinely feel a version of what they're feeling. It's why you automatically smile when a stranger smiles at you. Why your body tenses up when you're sitting next to someone who's clearly anxious. Why watching someone stub their toe makes you wince. Mirror neurons are also why subtle behavioral mirroring, naturally matching someone's posture, energy level, or speaking pace, creates such powerful rapport. When you do this well, the other person's brain registers it as social synchrony, a felt sense of being understood and connected, even if they can't consciously explain why they feel that way around you. But this system cuts both ways. If you're spending significant time around people who are chronically stressed, negative, or emotionally chaotic, your mirror neurons will pull you toward those states too, whether you want them to or not. This is not a metaphor. It's neuroscience. You literally absorb the emotional patterns of your environment over time, which means one of the highest leverage decisions you can make for your own psychological well-being is this. Be intentional about who you spend your time with, not cold or calculated, just conscious. The reward system, what everyone around you is actually chasing. Deep inside your brain sits your limbic system, the emotional core that processes social rewards and punishments. When you experience genuine connection, recognition, or acceptance, this system releases a cocktail of neurochemicals: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. The feelings that result, warmth, belonging, satisfaction, are among the most powerful motivators in human behavior. This is why a genuine compliment from someone you respect can make your entire week. Why being included matters so deeply. Why public recognition can motivate people more powerfully than a pay raise. Here's the insight that changes how you relate to everyone around you. Every person you interact with is seeking some form of social reward. Some want recognition. Some want acceptance. Some want status. Some want connection. Some want to feel competent and valued. When you can identify, not assume, but actually read what type of social reward someone is hungry for and then provide it authentically, you become someone they genuinely want to be around, not because you're flattering them, because you're actually seeing them. That's a rare gift, and it's entirely learnable. The alarm system, why social fear feels so physical. Your amygdala is your brain's threat detection center. And here's something that might reframe how you think about social anxiety forever. The same brain regions that process physical pain also activate when you experience social rejection, exclusion, or humiliation. Your brain doesn't distinguish between being punched and being publicly embarrassed. Both register as threats to survival. Both trigger the same alarm. This is why public speaking terrifies so many otherwise confident people. This is why rejection stings in a way that feels almost physical. This is why social anxiety isn't just being shy. It's your ancient brain misreading social risk as mortal danger. Understanding this doesn't make the fear disappear, but it changes your relationship to it. When you feel social anxiety, you're not broken or weak. You're human. Your alarm system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, just in a context where it's no longer helpful. The path forward isn't to eliminate the alarm. It's to gradually teach your nervous system through repeated positive experience that the social situations you fear are survivable. More than survivable, they're opportunities. The incredible plasticity of your social brain. Here's the most important thing you need to know about all of this. None of it is fixed. Your brain is not a finished product. The neural pathways that govern your social behavior, your empathy, your confidence, your ability to read a room, your emotional regulation under pressure, all of them can be strengthened through deliberate practice and conscious awareness. Every time you push yourself to hold eye contact a little longer, listen a little more deeply, regulate your reaction in a tense moment, or show up with genuine curiosity instead of defensive self-protection, you are literally rewiring your brain. You're making those circuits thicker, faster, more automatic. Social intelligence isn't a personality trait you either have or you don't. It's a skill set. And like every skill set, it responds to training. The version of you that reads a room effortlessly, builds trust naturally, and connects deeply with people, that version isn't some idealized fantasy. It's the version that shows up when you understand how your brain works and decide to work with it instead of against it. Chapter 3. The 4 Pillars of Social Intelligence. Mastery. Social intelligence is not one thing. It's not charm. It's not charisma. It's not even just being good at conversation. It's the sophisticated integration of 4 distinct but deeply connected capabilities. Think of them as the 4 load-bearing walls of a house. Remove any one of them, and the whole structure becomes unstable. Build all 4 strong, and you have something truly remarkable. The kind of presence that draws people in, builds lasting trust, and creates real influence in every room you enter. Let's walk through each one. Pillar 1. Social awareness. Learning to actually see people. Most people spend conversations waiting for their turn to talk. They're mentally rehearsing their next point, monitoring how they're coming across, thinking about what story to tell next. And while they're doing all of that internal broadcasting, they're missing the richest information available to them, what's actually happening with the person in front of them. Social awareness is the ability to shift your attention genuinely outward, to read not just what someone is saying, but what their face does when they say it. Not just the words, but the hesitation before them. Not just the answer to your question, but the energy behind it. This means developing sensitivity to microexpressions, the fleeting flashes of genuine emotion that cross someone's face before they can consciously manage them. It means listening to how people speak, not just what they say. It means noticing when someone's body language and words are telling 2 completely different stories. It also means reading the room, understanding the invisible social dynamics operating in any group. Who defers to whom? Where the real tension is. What's not being said, but is clearly being felt by everyone. Social awareness takes practice because it requires getting genuinely comfortable with silence and observation. But when you develop it, you gain access to a level of human understanding that most people never touch. Pillar 2. Self-management. The power to choose your response. You cannot effectively shape the emotional experience of others if you cannot first manage your own. Self-management is not suppression. It's not putting on a poker face and pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It's developing the capacity to recognize your own emotional states as they arise, and then consciously choosing how you respond rather than just reacting on autopilot. This starts with emotional self-awareness, noticing when defensiveness is rising in your chest, catching anxiety before it leaks into your body language, recognizing frustration before it sharpens your tone, And then, crucially, having tools to work with those states rather than being controlled by them. Think about the last time you were in a high-stakes conversation and felt yourself getting triggered. What happened to your thinking, your listening, your ability to find common ground? Probably all three collapsed simultaneously. That's what happens when self-management goes offline. Now think about someone you know who stays remarkably grounded under pressure, who brings calm into chaotic situations, who can disagree without becoming disagreeable. That person has developed Pillar 2, and their presence makes everyone around them perform better. Advanced self-management also means emotional flexibility, the ability to consciously shift your state to match what the situation actually needs. Sometimes you need to project warmth and patience. Sometimes you need energy and enthusiasm. Sometimes you need firm, clear authority. The most socially intelligent people can access all of these, not by being fake, but by having a wide enough emotional range to show up differently for different moments. Pillar 3. Social influence. Guiding without pushing. Real influence has nothing to do with pressure, manipulation, or getting people to do things against their will. Real influence is about understanding what genuinely motivates people, their values, their fears, their aspirations, and finding ways to connect your ideas authentically to those things. It's about creating conditions where people want to move in the direction you're pointing because they can see that it serves them. This begins with trust and credibility. You cannot influence people who don't feel safe with you, which means before you ever try to persuade anyone of anything, your first job is to demonstrate that you're genuinely on their side, that your recommendations serve their interests, not just yours. It also means understanding the psychology of how people actually make decisions. Hint, it's almost never purely logical. People decide with their emotions and justify with their reasoning. The most effective influencers know this. They speak to both. They give people the emotional why before the rational how. The highest form of social influence goes beyond persuasion entirely. It's inspirational motivation, connecting your ideas to people's deeper values and sense of purpose so they don't just agree with you intellectually. They become genuinely intrinsically committed. That's the difference between compliance and enthusiasm, between following orders and following a vision. Pillar 4. Relationship architecture. Building bonds. That last, the fourth pillar, is about something that most people leave entirely to chance: the deliberate construction and nurturing of deep, meaningful relationships over time. Not networking, not collecting contacts. Architecture. The conscious design of connections that actually matter. This requires understanding the mechanics of trust building, how vulnerability, carefully calibrated, creates intimacy faster than any surface-level pleasantry, how the small, consistent acts of follow-through build more credibility than grand gestures, how to repair relationships when they're strained rather than letting distance silently grow. It also requires understanding that all relationships follow predictable phases: initial connection, deepening trust, inevitable friction, and either renewal or slow decline. Skilled relationship architects don't just let these phases happen to them. They navigate them consciously, addressing tension early, continuously adding value to others' lives, and treating their closest relationships as the living, breathing investments they truly are. And it means building genuine networks, not transactional ones. People can feel the difference between someone who remembers your birthday because they genuinely care and someone who does it because they saw it in their CRM system. Authenticity in relationship maintenance isn't just nicer, it's more effective. The synergy that changes everything gears. What makes these four pillars so powerful together? Social awareness gives you the information you need to manage yourself well. Self-management creates the stable foundation from which you can genuinely influence others. That influence deepens your relationships, and those deep relationships give you more opportunities, more feedback, and more motivation to keep developing all four skills. It's an upward spiral, and it starts the moment you decide to build it. Chapter 4. Understanding Personality, Types and Behavioral Patterns. Let's talk about something that will immediately make your relationships easier, your conversations more effective, and your frustrations with other people dramatically lower. Most conflict between people isn't about bad intentions. It's about different wiring. The colleague who takes 3 days to reply to a simple question isn't being passive-aggressive, they're processing. The friend who thinks out loud in every conversation and seems to never stop talking isn't being self-centered, they're wired to think by speaking. The manager who wants a detailed step-by-step plan before making any decision isn't being rigid, they're being exactly who they are. Once you understand that people operate according to genuinely different psychological patterns, not better or worse, just different, you stop wasting energy being frustrated by people and start spending that energy actually connecting with them. Here's the framework that changes everything. The first dimension. Where does your energy come from? Some people walk into a party and leave 3 hours later feeling energized, buzzing, ready for round 2. Other people walk into the same party, have genuinely great conversations, and leave an hour later feeling like they need 48 hours of silence to recover. Neither of these people is broken. They're just introverts and extroverts. Extroverts draw their energy from external stimulation, conversation, activity, group dynamics. They think out loud. They process by talking. They often speak first and reflect later. In a brainstorming session, they're the ones firing ideas across the room before they fully formed. Introverts generate their best thinking internally. They reflect before they speak. They prefer depth over breadth in relationships, one meaningful conversation over 10 surface-level ones. They often have rich, complex inner worlds that people around them never fully see because they share selectively. Here's what this means practically for you. When you're working with or building a relationship with an introvert, give them time. Don't interpret their quietness as disinterest or disengagement. Ask thoughtful questions and then actually wait. Resist the urge to fill every silence. Their contributions are often the most considered ones in the room. They just need space to surface. With extroverts, match their energy. Engage interactively. Let conversations be dynamic and exploratory. But also, create natural pauses, because their instinct to externalize everything can sometimes crowd out perspectives they actually need to hear. Neither style is superior. The most socially intelligent people can flex toward both. They know when to bring energy to a conversation and when to bring space. The second dimension. How do you take in information? Imagine you're explaining a new project to 2 different people. The first one immediately asks, "Okay, but what are the specific steps? What's the timeline? What does success look like in measurable terms? The second one leans back and says, interesting. So where could this go in 5 years? What would it look like if it really worked? You've just met a sensor and an intuitive. Sensors are grounded in the concrete and the real. They trust what they can see, touch, verify, and track. They want specific examples, clear instructions, and evidence-based reasoning. Abstract theories without practical application feel frustrating and incomplete to them. They're often the people who make things actually work, the ones who catch the details everyone else missed. Intuitives live in the world of patterns, possibilities, and connections. They're drawn to the big picture, the future potential, the creative leap. They often get bored with details before they've finished reading them. They're the ones who see an unexpected connection between two seemingly unrelated ideas. And suddenly, you have an innovation. When communicating with sensors, be specific, be practical, lead with the concrete before the conceptual. Don't open with a vision speech. Open with the numbers, the steps, the evidence. Then zoom out. With intuitives, start with the vision, show them the horizon before you show them the road. Give them room to explore and reimagine before locking in the plan. They'll engage far more enthusiastically with the details once they can see how those details serve something bigger. The third dimension, how do you make decisions? This one causes more workplace friction and relationship tension than almost anything else because it touches something people feel deeply, their sense of what matters. Thinkers make decisions through logic, consistency, and objective analysis. They want to understand the rational basis for a choice. They value competence, efficiency, and fair application of clear principles. When they give you direct, sometimes blunt feedback, they're not being unkind. They're being precise. They genuinely believe that honesty without softening is a form of respect. Feelers make decisions by weighing values, relationships, and human impact. They want to understand how a decision affects people, all the people, not just the metrics. They value harmony, authenticity, and compassion. When they seem to be taking things personally, they're often not being oversensitive. They're tracking something important that pure logic is missing. Working with thinkers, lead with data, logic, and clear reasoning. Be direct. Don't pad your communication with excessive softening. It can actually make you seem less credible to them. Acknowledge the potential challenges with rational solutions ready. Working with feelers, invest in rapport before you get to business. Show genuine care for the human dimensions of whatever you're discussing. Acknowledge the emotional reality of the situation, not as a box to check, but as something that genuinely matters, because to them it does. And here's something worth sitting with. Both perspectives are catching real things. The thinker is right that clarity and logic prevent a lot of problems. The feeler is right that ignoring human impact creates a different set of problems. The best decisions integrate both. The fourth dimension. How do you organize your world? Some people feel physically uncomfortable with open loops, unfinished decisions, changing plans, ambiguous timelines. These things don't just annoy them, they create genuine cognitive strain. These are judges, and their superpower is getting things done, meeting deadlines, and creating the structure that makes execution possible. Perceivers, on the other hand, experience rigid structure as suffocating. They do some of their best work in the final sprint before a deadline. They're energized by options, flexibility, and the freedom to adapt as they learn more. Close the door on possibilities too early, and you lose their engagement entirely. With judges, be organized, be punctual, provide clear timelines and structured plans. When you need to change course, explain the reasoning and offer a new clear structure immediately. Don't leave them in ambiguity. It's not just uncomfortable for them, it actually impairs their performance. With perceivers, build in flexibility. Present options rather than directives. Invite their input in shaping the plan rather than handing them a finished one. And if you need a decision, be honest about the timeline, but give them as much room as genuinely possible before that deadline hits. What actually motivates people? Beyond these 4 dimensions, there's one more layer that transforms your ability to connect and influence. Understanding what each person is fundamentally driven by. Some people are wired for achievement. They're energized by challenges, competitions, and opportunities to demonstrate what they're capable of. Recognition fuels them. Public acknowledgement of their contributions matters deeply. Some people are driven by security. They want clear expectations, proven methods, and steady environments where they can build something reliable over time. They're not resistant to change because they're timid. They're resistant because stability is genuinely what allows them to do their best work. Some people crave autonomy above almost everything else. Give them the goal and get out of the way. Micromanagement isn't just annoying to them. It's demoralizing at a core level. Trust is their love language, and some people are most alive in connection. They thrive in collaborative environments, care deeply about team unity, and derive meaning from shared experience. For them, a win that nobody else was part of feels incomplete. When you can identify which of these drives is most active in the person across from you, and then speak to that drive, you're no longer communicating at people. You're communicating with them. And that distinction changes everything about how they receive what you're saying. The goal isn't to put people in boxes. People are far too complex for that. The goal is to develop enough sensitivity to patterns that you can adapt your approach in real time, meeting people where they actually are, rather than where you assume them to be. That flexibility, that genuine consideration for how others process the world, is one of the most powerful expressions of social intelligence there is. Chapter 5. The Science of First Impressions and Snap Judgments. You've heard the stat before, 7 seconds. That's roughly how long it takes for someone to form a first impression of you. But here's what that statistic doesn't tell you, and what actually matters. Those 7 seconds aren't a shallow, superficial glance that thoughtful people can override with patience and open-mindedness. Those 7 seconds trigger a cascade of automatic judgments that then act as a filter through which every subsequent interaction gets interpreted. If your first impression lands as confident and trustworthy, the person across from you will unconsciously look for evidence that confirms that judgment. Ambiguous moments will be read generously. Mistakes will be forgiven more easily. The benefit of the doubt becomes your default setting with them. If your first impression lands as uncertain or off-putting, even for reasons completely outside your control, those same ambiguous moments will be interpreted through a negative lens. And correcting that initial impression takes sustained, consistent, positive experience over a long period of time. It's not fair, but it is human, and once you understand it, you can work with it. What your face is saying. Before you speak, the most powerful element of any first impression is something you might not even think about consciously: your facial expression in the moment of initial contact. Faces with warm, open expressions create immediate feelings of approachability and safety in others, triggering the very neurological response we talked about in Chapter 1. Faces that are tense, flat, or guarded trigger low-level threat detection before a word has been exchanged. And here's the detail that matters most. The difference between a genuine smile and a performed one is instantly detectable, not consciously, but neurologically. A real smile engages the muscles around your eyes, creating tiny crow's feet at the corners. A social smile that's manufactured for the moment only moves the mouth. People's brains process this difference in milliseconds and categorize it accordingly. Genuine warmth or social performance? The implication isn't that you need to walk around forcing yourself to feel joyful. It's that genuine presence, actually being interested in the person you're meeting, produces the kind of facial expression that no technique can fully replicate. The best first impression strategy is radical presence. Your body is speaking a language everyone understands. Before you say a word, your posture has already made a statement. Upright, open posture, shoulders relaxed and back, head level, chest open, signals self-assurance and competence. It tells the room, I'm comfortable here, I belong here, not aggressively, just naturally. Collapsed posture, shoulders rounded forward, head tilted down, body made smaller, communicates the opposite. And here's the part people often miss. It doesn't just communicate low confidence to others. It actually creates lower confidence in you through the bidirectional relationship between body and mind that we'll explore more deeply in later chapters. The space you occupy also sends signals. Confident people use space comfortably. Open gestures, relaxed positioning, a natural ease with their physical presence. They don't sprawl aggressively or make themselves artificially large. They simply don't make themselves small. Your voice arrives before your words. The moment you open your mouth, something happens in the listener's brain before they've processed a single word you've said. They've already assessed your authority, your emotional state, and your confidence level based purely on the quality of your voice. Lower-pitched voices are processed as more authoritative and trustworthy. This is true across genders and cultures, not because of any conscious preference, but because of deep evolutionary associations between vocal depth and physical and social capability. Speaking pace matters just as much. Slightly slower speech, not dramatically slow, just deliberate, signals thoughtfulness and control. Very fast speech can register as anxiety or lack of preparation, even when the content is excellent. And the strategic use of pauses? Genuinely underestimated. A well-placed pause before an important point doesn't make you seem uncertain. It makes what follows feel more significant. It signals that you're someone who chooses words carefully, and that what's coming next is worth waiting for. The halo effect, understanding the bias that shapes everything. One more thing you need to understand about first impressions. The halo effect. When we perceive one strongly positive quality in someone, confidence, warmth, physical attractiveness, clear competence, our brain automatically assumes that other positive qualities are present too. We fill in the blanks generously. We become biased toward liking and trusting that person. The reverse halo works exactly the same way in the opposite direction. This isn't a character flaw in the people judging you. It's a feature of how human cognition processes incomplete information. We pattern match to fill gaps. Understanding it helps you do two things. First, invest in making genuinely strong first impressions because the downstream effects are real and lasting. Second, stay appropriately skeptical of your own first impressions of others because someone who makes a poor initial impression due to nerves, cultural difference, or a simply bad day might be exactly the person you most need in your corner. The goal isn't to game first impressions. It's to show up as the best, most genuine version of yourself from the very first moment, with enough self-awareness to also extend grace to others who may not be doing the same. Chapter 6, Microexpressions and the Language of the Face. Imagine you could see past what people say and read what they actually feel. Not mind reading, something more grounded than that. Something real, observable, and learnable. That's exactly what microexpression reading gives you. The human face is capable of producing over 10,000 distinct expressions. Most of them are controlled, managed, socially appropriate masks that people consciously choose. But beneath those masks, in flashes lasting less than a quarter of a second, far too fast for conscious control, genuine emotions surface and disappear. These are microexpressions, and they reveal the unfiltered emotional truth that words can easily conceal. The 7 universal expressions. These 7 expressions appear on human faces across every culture, every age group, every background. They're neurologically hardwired, not learned, not cultural, universal. Happiness. The only emotion where faking it is genuinely difficult to hide. Real happiness engages the muscles around the eyes, creating those characteristic small lines at the outer corners. Performed happiness stays in the mouth. When you see genuine happiness flash across someone's face while discussing a topic, you found something they actually care about. That's invaluable information for building real connection. Sadness. A subtle drooping of the upper eyelids, a slight downward pull at the mouth corners, the inner eyebrows drawing upward and together. Sadness microexpressions often appear when people are trying to appear stronger than they feel, discussing a loss while insisting they're fine, talking about a disappointment while waving it off. When you catch it, the most powerful thing you can do is acknowledge the feeling rather than rushing to fix it. Sometimes being seen is the whole point. Anger. The brows lower and draw together, lips press or thin, jaw tightens slightly. Anger can flash during conversations where someone appears entirely calm and agreeable on the surface. Catching it early lets you address the underlying friction before it builds pressure and erupts later. When you spot anger you didn't expect, slow down. Ask. Check for understanding. There's something beneath the surface that hasn't been said. Fear, raised upper eyelids, tensed lower lids, eyebrows raised and pulled together, mouth sometimes pulling back slightly at the corners. Fear often disguises itself as resistance or disagreement. But the underlying experience isn't opposition. It's worry about what might go wrong. When you recognize fear beneath pushback, your entire approach can shift from persuasion to reassurance. Surprise. The briefest of all because surprise itself is fleeting. Wide eyes, raised brows, dropped jaw. It appears and immediately transforms into another emotion, whatever the person feels about what surprised them. Genuine surprise can't be convincingly faked. The coordination of muscles is too complex. When you see it, you know the information truly landed differently than expected. Disgust. Wrinkling of the nose, slight raising of the upper lip. Disgust isn't always physical. It appears when someone encounters something that violates their values, their ethics, or their aesthetic sensibility. When you spot disgust, it's a signal that you may have crossed a boundary, stated or unstated. That's worth pausing for. Contempt, the only asymmetrical universal expression. A slight raising of just one corner of the mouth, a half smirk, a faint sneer. Contempt signals perceived superiority, a sense of being above whatever is being contempted. It's the most corrosive emotion in relationships because it creates hierarchy rather than connection. When you see it directed at you or someone else in a group setting, it's a signal of a serious underlying dynamic that won't resolve on its own. How to actually use this skill. The point of reading microexpressions is not to become a human polygraph, catching people in lies and calling them out. That approach destroys trust and relationship faster than almost anything else. The point is to become a more sensitive, more responsive, more genuinely attuned person in every interaction. When someone's microexpressions contradict their words, you don't confront, you inquire, gently, curiously. How are you actually feeling about this? Or simply slow down, create space, and let them come to it themselves. Use what you observe as information, not ammunition. As a prompt to ask better questions, offer more meaningful reassurance, or adjust your approach in real time. The most socially intelligent people aren't reading faces to gain an advantage. They're reading faces because they're genuinely interested in what's happening inside the person across from them. And that intention, that real curiosity and care, is what transforms a technical skill into something that actually deepens human connection. Chapter 7. Body Language Mastery. What people don't say. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. Research consistently shows that the majority of what we communicate in any face-to-face interaction has nothing to do with the words we choose. It's carried in how we hold our body, how we move through space, what our hands are doing, where our eyes go, and the quality of energy we bring into a room. Words are the surface layer of communication. Body language is the ocean underneath. And here's what makes this especially important for you. While people can carefully curate their words, rehearse their talking points, and consciously manage what they say, body language operates largely outside conscious control, which means it's simultaneously the most honest channel of communication available and the most powerful one to develop intentional awareness around. Let's build that awareness now. Your body shapes your mind, not just the other way around. Most people think of body language as purely outward communication, signals you send to others. But there's a second, equally important dimension that most people never consider. Your physical positioning doesn't just communicate your emotional state to others. It actively creates your emotional state within yourself. This is the bidirectional relationship between body and mind. Your thoughts influence your posture, yes, but your posture also directly influences your thoughts, your hormonal levels, and your felt sense of confidence. Social researcher Amy Cuddy's work demonstrated that holding open, expansive postures for just 2 minutes produces measurable physiological changes increased testosterone and reduced cortisol, creating genuine feelings of confidence and reducing stress responses. The body isn't just reflecting the mind, it's shaping it. What this means practically: before a high-stakes conversation, a challenging meeting, or any situation where you want to show up at your best, your physical preparation matters as much as your mental preparation. How you stand in the elevator on the way up to the boardroom affects how you feel when you walk through the door. How you sit in the waiting room before a difficult conversation affects the state you bring into the room. Your body is not just a vehicle for your mind, it's a tool for managing it. Posture, the foundation of presence. The single most fundamental element of confident body language is spinal alignment. When you stand or sit with your spine naturally upright, not rigidly military, not artificially puffed up, just balanced, you project competence and self-assurance without effort. More than that, this alignment optimizes your breathing, which directly affects your energy, your vocal quality, and your ability to think clearly under pressure. Think of your spine not as something to force into position, but as a natural stack that wants to balance. Your head floating easily on top, rather than being held in place through muscular strain. Your shoulders broad and relaxed, not pulled back aggressively, not rolled forward defensively, just open. The contrast is stark. Collapsed posture, rounded shoulders, forward head, body making itself smaller, communicates low energy and uncertainty. It also creates those feelings, not just communicates them. The person who walks into a room in a physical collapse is fighting an uphill battle before they've said a word. The good news? Posture is adjustable in real time. The moment you notice yourself collapsing, you can reset. And with enough conscious practice, the aligned version becomes your natural default. Hands, the most expressive part of your body. Watch skilled communicators, and you'll notice something consistent about how they use their hands, deliberately, openly, and in coordination with their words. Open hand gestures, palms visible, moving away from the body, signal honesty, openness, and engagement. They invite rather than repel. They emphasize rather than distract. Hidden hands, in pockets behind the back, locked under a table, create unconscious suspicion in observers. Your brain is wired to track hands as potential threat indicators. When hands disappear, something subtle but real shifts in the listener's level of trust. Crossed arms are more contextual than commonly assumed. Sometimes people cross their arms because they're cold, or because it's a comfortable resting position, or because they're concentrating deeply. It doesn't automatically mean defensiveness, but in combination with other closed signals, reduced eye contact, turned away body, flattened facial expression, it becomes part of a meaningful cluster. That word, cluster, is the key to reading body language accurately. Never interpret a single gesture in isolation. Look for patterns. Look for congruence or contradiction between what's being said verbally and what the body is simultaneously expressing. The contradictions are where the most valuable information lives. The space between you, proxemics, and what distance reveals. Every person carries an invisible set of spatial boundaries, comfort zones that expand or contract depending on the relationship, the context, and the culture. In most Western contexts, intimate space, within roughly 18 inches, is reserved for people we're deeply close to. Personal space, up to about 4 feet, is for friends and trusted colleagues. Social space, 4 to 12 feet, is appropriate for professional interactions and acquaintances. Public space, beyond 12 feet, is for presentations and formal settings. When someone consistently maintains greater distance than the situation would normally call for, it often signals discomfort, emotional distance, or a desire for more psychological space. When someone moves closer than the context suggests is typical, it might indicate warmth and connection, or, depending on dynamics, an attempt to establish dominance. One of the most revealing proximity signals isn't distance at all, it's direction. When people are genuinely engaged and interested, their entire body orients toward you, not just their head, their torso, their feet, their full physical attention. When someone's feet are pointing toward the exit while their face is still making polite conversation, their body is telling you the real story. Mirroring, the silent language of rapport. Here's one of the most powerful phenomena in all of interpersonal psychology, and it happens mostly without anyone realizing it. When people feel genuine connection with each other, they unconsciously begin to mirror each other's posture, gestures, energy levels, and speech patterns. It's called behavioral synchrony, and it's your brain's way of physically expressing, "I'm with you." You can observe this anywhere. Watch two close friends at a coffee shop. Notice how they subtly match each other's posture, how their energy levels align, how laughter triggers laughter. Watch a couple who's deeply comfortable together. They'll move through space with an almost choreographed coordination they're completely unaware of. You can use this deliberately to build rapport, but only if you do it well. Obvious, mechanical mimicking is immediately detected and feels deeply manipulative. It destroys trust faster than almost anything else. Effective mirroring is about matching energy and general physical orientation rather than copying specific movements. If someone leans forward with engaged enthusiasm, you naturally lean forward slightly too. If someone brings a quieter, more reflective energy to the conversation, you meet them there rather than projecting your full intensity onto them. When done naturally, which comes with practice and genuine interest in the other person, mirroring accelerates rapport in ways that feel completely organic to both parties. It says, without words, "I see you. I'm here with you. We're in sync." Nervous habits, the signals you don't know. You're sending, everyone has them. Touching your face when you're uncomfortable, fidgeting with a pen or your phone, playing with your hair when you're anxious, adjusting your clothing when you want to disappear. These self-soothing behaviors are almost entirely unconscious, which makes them among the most honest signals available. They reveal what's happening internally when someone is trying to maintain a composed external surface. Developing awareness of your own nervous habits, not to eliminate all natural movement, but to stop broadcasting anxiety you don't need to broadcast, is one of the most immediately impactful things you can do for your presence. Not because stillness is inherently better than movement, but because intentional movement reads completely differently than anxious movement. The goal is genuine ease, the kind that comes not from perfect technique, but from actually feeling more comfortable in your own skin. And that comfort, as with so many elements of social intelligence, grows through deliberate practice and accumulated positive experience. Chapter 8. Vocal Patterns and the Psychology of Tone. Close your eyes for a moment and think about the most compelling speaker you've ever heard in person. Not on a screen, in the room. Someone whose voice made you lean forward. Someone who could hold silence and make it feel intentional rather than awkward. Someone whose tone told you exactly how to feel about what they were saying before your brain had fully processed the words. Now think about what specifically created that effect. Chances are it wasn't their vocabulary. It wasn't even their content, at least not primarily. It was the instrument they were using to deliver it. Your voice is one of the most powerful communication tools you possess, and most people have never spent a single hour developing it deliberately. Pitch. Why lower resonance? Commands more attention. Across virtually every culture and context studied, lower-pitched voices are automatically associated with authority, trustworthiness, and competence. This isn't a conscious preference. It's a deep neurological pattern that processes vocal pitch as a proxy for capability and confidence. This is why both men and women unconsciously lower their pitch when they want to be taken seriously. When someone drops into their lower register to make a point, something shifts in the room. People listen differently. But, and this matters, the goal is not to artificially force your voice as low as it can go. Strained, unnaturally low speech reads as exactly what it is. Performance? The goal is to find your optimal pitch range, the lower third of your natural register, where your voice carries the most resonance and power, and speak from there habitually rather than defaulting to the higher, thinner register that stress and anxiety tend to push you toward. This requires breath support. Deep, diaphragmatic breathing from your belly rather than your chest is the foundation of resonant, authoritative vocal delivery. When you breathe shallowly, your voice becomes thin and tight. When you breathe fully, your voice opens up and fills the space. Pace, the confidence signal. Nobody talks about enough. Speed of speech is one of the most immediate, instinctive signals of confidence and composure that exists. Very fast speech, regardless of how intelligent the content, triggers unconscious associations with anxiety, uncertainty, or lack of preparation. The listener's brain registers it as, this person is rushing, because they're not sure they'll be allowed to finish, or because they're nervous, or because they don't fully trust what they're saying. Deliberately slower speech, not dramatically slow, just measured, signals the opposite. It communicates, I'm comfortable here. I'm not rushing because I know what I'm saying matters, and I trust you to stay with me. The most compelling speakers vary their pace strategically. They slow down to land a key point, letting it breathe before moving on. They speed up slightly to create energy and momentum during high engagement moments. And they use something that most people actively avoid: silence. The strategic pause, your most underused vocal tool. Most people are terrified of silence in conversation. The moment a pause appears, every instinct screams to fill it with an so, anything to bridge the gap and keep the sound flowing. But here's what those fillers actually communicate: uncertainty. The scramble to fill silence reads as a lack of confidence in what you're saying, as if you need the constant forward momentum of words to keep people engaged because you're not sure the content alone is strong enough. A deliberate pause does something completely different. It creates anticipation. It signals that what's coming next was worth waiting for. It gives the listener's brain time to fully absorb what was just said before the next thing arrives, and it communicates something fundamental about your character. I'm comfortable with silence. I don't need to perform continuously to maintain my place in this conversation. Start experimenting with pauses deliberately. Before important points, after significant statements, at natural transition moments. The discomfort you feel during those pauses is almost entirely internal. To the listener, they feel like gravitas. Vocal variety, the difference between engaging and monotone. Monotone delivery is the audio equivalent of a blank wall. It's not offensive. It's just nothing. It provides no emotional cues, no emphasis signals, no guidance for the listener about how to feel about what they're hearing. Natural vocal variety, changes in pitch, pace, volume, and energy that track the emotional content of what you're communicating, keeps listeners engaged at a neurological level. It tells their brains, pay attention. Something is changing. This doesn't mean being theatrical or artificially dramatic. It means allowing your genuine engagement with what you're saying to be audible. When you're excited about an idea, let that excitement come through. When something is serious, let your tone reflect that weight. When you're making a point that you believe in deeply, let your conviction be hearable. The speakers who captivate rooms aren't the ones with the most polished technique. They're the ones whose voice and content are completely congruent, where every element of how they speak amplifies rather than contradicts what they're saying, eliminating the patterns that undermine you. 3 specific vocal patterns silently erode perceived competence and authority, and they're worth addressing directly. Vocal fry, that creaky, gravelly sound that occurs when your voice drops to its lowest register without proper breath support, registers unconsciously as low energy and low confidence, uptalk, ending statements with rising intonation as if every sentence is a question, creates a constant undercurrent of uncertainty. Even when your content is strong, uptalk frames it as tentative rather than assured. Filler words, like, sort of, kind of, are the audio equivalent of nervous fidgeting. They signal that you're not quite sure where you're going next, or that you don't fully trust what you're saying. Eliminating these patterns requires, first and foremost, awareness. Record yourself speaking in a real conversation or presentation context. Not a practice run, but an actual interaction. Listen back. Most people are genuinely shocked by what they hear. That shock is the beginning of change. Then practice replacing fillers with silence. Replace uptalk with deliberate downward-ending statement intonation. Replace vocal fry with breath support. These shifts don't happen overnight, but the impact on how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself is significant and fast. Chapter 9. The Psychology of Influence and Persuasion. Let's clear something up immediately, because this topic carries a lot of baggage. Influence is not manipulation. Manipulation is getting people to do things that serve you at their expense, through deception, pressure, or exploitation of psychological vulnerabilities. It's extracting value. It's treating people as means rather than ends. Genuine influence is something completely different. It's creating conditions where people can clearly see how your ideas, your proposals, or your vision genuinely serve their interests and values, and then making it easy for them to say yes. It's adding value. It's treating people as intelligent adults capable of making good decisions when given good information in a form they can actually receive. The most influential people you know aren't the ones who pressure or manipulate. They're the ones you trust, the ones who make you feel more capable and more seen after interacting with them, the ones whose recommendations you seek out because their track record of genuinely caring about your outcomes has earned that trust. That's what we're building here. Reciprocity. Give first. Always the most fundamental principle of ethical influence is this: provide genuine value before you ever ask for anything in return. This works not just because it's good strategy, though it is, but because reciprocity is one of the deepest hardwired drives in human psychology. When someone genuinely helps us, our brain creates a felt sense of wanting to give something back, not out of obligation in a transactional sense, but out of a genuine desire to restore balance in a relationship that now feels positive and worth maintaining. The key word is genuine. A favor that's transparently performed to create obligation doesn't trigger positive reciprocity. It triggers suspicion and resentment. The influence comes from actually caring about the other person's interests, actually providing something useful, actually showing up as a resource rather than an extractor. Share knowledge without keeping score. Make introductions without expecting anything back. Give your full attention in a world where attention is increasingly scarce. These small, consistent acts of value creation build the kind of relational capital that compounds dramatically over time. Commitment and consistency. The power of their own words. Once someone takes a position, especially publicly, especially voluntarily, they feel internal psychological pressure to remain consistent with that position. This isn't weakness or irrationality. It's a fundamental feature of human identity formation. We define ourselves partly through our commitments, and inconsistency with those commitments creates genuine cognitive discomfort. The ethical influence application. Help people articulate their own values, priorities, and goals before you introduce your proposal. Ask questions that lead them to express what they already believe and want. When they've stated their position in their own words, the alignment between their stated values and your proposal becomes something they feel internally, rather than something you're telling them from outside. You're not putting words in anyone's mouth. You're asking good enough questions that they discover the alignment themselves. That's influence through genuine inquiry rather than pressure. Social proof, the power of relevant examples. When people are uncertain about a decision, they instinctively look to what others in similar situations have done. This is especially true when those others are people they identify with, same industry, same background, similar challenges and goals. Use this ethically by being specific and relevant with your examples. Don't just say, lots of people have done this. Say, your counterpart at that organization you respect tried this approach 6 months ago, and here's specifically what happened. The more closely your example matches the actual situation of the person you're talking with, the more powerfully it lands. And when possible, facilitate direct conversation between the person you're talking with and others who've been through the relevant experience. Nothing is more persuasive than a genuine peer saying, I was skeptical too. Here's what I found. Liking, authority, and scarcity. 3 more levers. People are more easily influenced by those they genuinely like. People who are similar to them, who show authentic interest in them, who make them feel good about themselves. This isn't shallow. It's how trust gets established quickly enough to make decisions feel safe. People defer to demonstrated expertise, not necessarily formal credentials, but clear, specific evidence of competence in areas that matter to them. Building appropriate authority means developing genuine expertise and finding credible, non-arrogant ways to let that expertise be visible. And people respond to genuine scarcity, not manufactured urgency designed to panic them into decisions, but real constraints of time, availability, or access honestly communicated. The ethical version of scarcity is simply being transparent. Here's the window we're actually working with, and here's why. That's not pressure. That's information. Framing. The same facts, completely different impact. Here's something that should permanently change how you communicate important ideas. The same factual information, framed differently, produces dramatically different responses in people. Not because they're irrational, but because context and framing genuinely change the meaning of information, not just its packaging. Telling a risk-averse person about the potential gains of a new approach will get less traction than telling them about the risks of not taking the approach. Telling an opportunity seeker about loss prevention will get less traction than painting a vivid picture of what's possible. This isn't deception. The facts are identical. The framing simply matches how that particular person's brain is already organized to process decisions. Meeting people's cognitive style with your communication is a form of respect, not manipulation. The highest form of influence, inspiration beyond all the principles above, reciprocity, consistency, social proof, liking, authority, scarcity, framing. There exists a level of influence that transcends all of them. It's what happens when you connect your idea, your proposal, your vision to something that genuinely matters to the person across from you. Not their surface-level preferences, their deep values, their sense of purpose, what they want their life and work to mean. When someone can clearly see how saying yes to what you're proposing helps them become more of who they're trying to be, when it serves not just their goals but their identity, you don't need to persuade them. They persuade themselves. And the commitment that follows isn't compliance. It's ownership. That's the difference between influence and inspiration is available to anyone willing to understand people deeply enough to find what genuinely moves them. Chapter 10. Emotional Contagion. How emotions spread. Think about the last time you walked into a room and immediately felt something shift inside you, without anyone saying a word. Maybe it was a tense silence that made your shoulders rise. Maybe it was collective excitement that made your heart beat a little faster. Maybe it was a calm, grounded energy that made you exhale and feel safe before anyone even acknowledged you were there. That wasn't your imagination. That was emotional contagion, one of the most powerful and least understood forces in all of human psychology. Emotions don't stay inside the people who feel them. They move, they spread, they transfer from nervous system to nervous system with a speed and precision that completely bypasses conscious awareness. And once you truly understand this, not just intellectually, but in your bones, it changes how you show up in every single interaction you have. The neuroscience of emotional spread, here's what's actually happening beneath the surface of every social interaction. When you're in the presence of another person, your brain is automatically and continuously scanning their facial expressions, their posture, their breathing rhythm, their vocal tone. And as it scans, your mirror neuron system begins replicating those patterns inside your own body. Your facial muscles make micro movements that match theirs. Your breathing begins to synchronize. Your heart rate subtly adjusts. And through this physical mimicry, happening completely below the threshold of conscious awareness, you begin to feel a version of what they're feeling. Researchers call this emotional convergence. It typically takes only minutes of sustained interaction for two people's emotional states to begin synchronizing. And it happens regardless of what you consciously think about the person or situation. Your rational mind might be telling you everything is fine. Your nervous system might already be absorbing something completely different from the environment around you. This isn't weakness. It's deeply human. It evolved because synchronized emotional states within groups allowed for faster, more coordinated responses to shared threats and opportunities. When one person in a group felt danger, that feeling needed to spread, and fast. Today, that same mechanism operates in your open plan office, your family dinners, your team meetings. 3 levels of emotional contagion. Understanding how emotional contagion operates across 3 distinct levels gives you far more precision in working with it. The first level is automatic mimicry, the unconscious physical replication of others' expressions and posture. Someone smiles genuinely at you, and before you've consciously decided to smile back, the muscles around your own eyes are already activating. Someone speaks in a tight, rapid, pressured way, and your own breathing begins to shorten and accelerate to match. This level is almost entirely involuntary. You can develop some conscious influence over it, breathing deliberately, choosing your physical posture, but it requires consistent practice to override the default. The second level is emotional convergence, where the physical mimicry creates actual emotional experience, because emotions aren't purely mental states, they're fundamentally physical ones. Replicating someone's emotional physiology starts to generate the emotion itself inside you. Your body doesn't distinguish between feeling anxious because something happened to you and feeling anxious because you've been sitting next to a panicking colleague for 40 minutes. This is why your social environment isn't just context for your emotional life. It is your emotional life to a significant degree. The people you spend the most time with aren't just influencing your mood. They're shaping the baseline chemistry of your inner world. The third level is emotional amplification. What happens when multiple people share the same emotional state simultaneously? Groups don't just experience emotions together, they intensify them. A single person's excitement becomes contagious enthusiasm. Shared anxiety becomes collective panic. Mutual joy becomes euphoria that no individual could generate alone. This is why team dynamics are so extraordinarily powerful. One person's genuine, grounded confidence can steady an entire group under pressure. One person's chronic negativity can drain collective energy from a team that would otherwise be thriving. The emotional leader in any room, regardless of their formal title, is the person whose emotional state sets the tone for everyone else's. You are always broadcasting. Here's the implication that most people find simultaneously uncomfortable and empowering. Your emotional state is never purely private. It radiates constantly to everyone in your proximity. The anxiety you're trying to keep contained is visible in your breathing, your posture, the slight tension around your eyes, the quality of your voice. The frustration you're managing internally is leaking through your tone, your word choices, the microexpressions flashing across your face. The genuine enthusiasm you feel, even when you're trying to be professionally measured, is contagious in ways that no amount of strategic communication can replicate. This means that emotional regulation isn't just a personal practice, it's a social responsibility. When you walk into a room carrying calm, grounded confidence, you are actively contributing to the psychological safety and performance of everyone in that room. When you walk in carrying unmanaged anxiety or suppressed frustration, you are actively making it harder for everyone else to think clearly, collaborate effectively, and feel secure. You don't have to be responsible for everyone else's feelings, but you do have to be honest about the fact that your emotional state affects them, whether you intend it to or not. Protecting yourself from negative emotional environments, understanding emotional contagion also means taking seriously the impact of prolonged exposure to toxic emotional environments. If you spend significant time around people who are chronically negative, anxious, or emotionally volatile, regardless of how psychologically resilient you are, your nervous system will gradually absorb those patterns. It's not a matter of willpower or mental strength. It's physiology. This doesn't mean cutting people out the moment they're going through a hard time. It means being honest with yourself about the difference between someone who's temporarily struggling and someone whose baseline emotional environment is consistently corrosive. Protecting yourself practically looks like several things. Deliberate breathing, slow, deep, rhythmic, during emotionally charged environments, helps regulate your nervous system and prevents unconscious matching of other stress. Patterns. Physical distance, when possible and appropriate, literally reduces the intensity of emotional transmission. And conscious emotional labeling. Pausing to notice, I'm feeling anxious right now, and I'm not sure this is actually mine, creates enough psychological space to evaluate the feeling rather than being swept into it. One of the most underrated practices in emotional self-management is what you might call a transition ritual, a brief but deliberate reset between emotionally demanding interactions. A few minutes of intentional breathing, a short walk, even just 2 minutes of conscious stillness. These micro-recoveries prevent emotional residue from one interaction contaminating the next. Becoming an emotional leader. The most advanced application of everything in this chapter is what researchers call emotional leadership. Taking conscious responsibility for the emotional atmosphere you create and using that responsibility to improve group dynamics, relationships, and collective outcomes. Emotional leaders understand something that most people never consciously articulate. The quality of their inner state is their most powerful leadership tool, more powerful than their strategy, more powerful than their credentials, more powerful than their authority. A calm, steady presence during a crisis communicates something that no reassuring speech can fully replicate. I've got this. We've got this. We're going to be okay. And because emotions are contagious, that message doesn't just land intellectually, it transfers neurologically, helping everyone else's nervous system down-regulate and return to clear thinking. Genuine enthusiasm for a project or vision creates momentum that no motivational speech can manufacture. Compassionate presence during someone's difficult moment provides healing that no perfectly chosen words can match. You don't need a leadership title for any of this. You just need the awareness that your emotional state ripples outward and the commitment to be intentional about what you're sending into the world. Chapter 11. Social Hierarchy and Power Dynamics. Here's a truth that makes some people uncomfortable, but once you accept it, your entire ability to navigate social environments improves immediately. Every human group organizes itself into hierarchies, not because anyone decides to, not because it's fair or unfair, because it's the fundamental organizational mechanism through which groups of human beings coordinate, reduce conflict, and allocate resources and responsibility. You are already embedded in multiple hierarchies right now. At work, in your social circles, in your family, in your community. The question isn't whether these hierarchies exist. It's whether you're navigating them consciously or just being buffeted around by them without understanding what's actually happening. The difference between real status and performed status. Status is communicated through hundreds of subtle behavioral signals that operate entirely below conscious awareness. High-status individuals tend to move more deliberately and slowly. They speak with greater vocal authority. They take up space comfortably rather than apologetically. They make direct eye contact without it feeling aggressive. They show genuine interest in others without needing validation in return. But here's the crucial distinction that most conversations about status miss entirely. True high status and dominance displays are completely different things. Dominance displays, loud voices, aggressive posturing, deliberate interruption, making yourself physically large, are almost always compensatory. They're performed by people who aren't secure enough in their actual status to let it speak for itself. The person who genuinely belongs in the room doesn't need to announce it. Authentic high status is characterized by something quieter and far more powerful. Calm. The ability to be fully present without needing to manage others' perceptions of you. The generosity to elevate others rather than compete with them. The security to acknowledge what you don't know without feeling threatened by the admission. When you encounter someone who makes you feel genuinely seen, respected, and capable in their presence, that's authentic high status. When you encounter someone who makes you feel subtly diminished, monitored, or in competition, that's dominance performance. Learn to distinguish between the two, and you'll never be manipulated by either. Building competence-based status. The most durable form of status is built on one thing: being genuinely excellent at something that creates real value for others, not the appearance of competence, not credentials displayed strategically, actual capability developed through real investment and demonstrated through real results. This is worth stating plainly because it cuts through a lot of the social anxiety that people bring to status dynamics. You don't need to outmaneuver anyone. You don't need to play politics. You don't need to manage perceptions through carefully calibrated impression management. You need to become genuinely good at things that matter, and let that goodness be visible through what you actually produce and how you actually show up. Continuous learning, skill development, honest self-assessment, and the willingness to do the unglamorous work of actual improvement. These are the foundations of status that lasts. Everything else is decoration. Social capital, your most valuable long-term asset. Beyond individual competence, the most influential people in any field share something else. They've built extraordinary social capital. the accumulated value of their relationships, reputation, and the trust others place in their word and character. Social capital is built slowly and lost quickly. It compounds through thousands of small, consistent acts, keeping commitments when it's inconvenient to keep them, sharing opportunities generously when you could have kept them to yourself, speaking well of people when they're not in the room, maintaining your standards when nobody is watching. It's destroyed through a much smaller number of large, visible failures of character: the betrayed confidence, the credit taken for someone else's work, the commitment quietly abandoned, the person thrown under the bus to protect your own position. People with high social capital don't just have more influence, they have more resilient influence. When they make mistakes, the goodwill reserve they've built provides a buffer. When they ask for support, people say yes, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire to reciprocate years of generosity. Building social capital requires shifting from a scarcity mindset, hoarding opportunities, information, and connections, to an abundance mindset. The counterintuitive reality is that the more generously you share your resources and connections with others, the more your own status and influence grows. Not because you're strategically performing generosity, but because genuine abundance mentality makes you someone people genuinely want to support. Navigating group dynamics. Every group you belong to contains a predictable cast of functional roles, and understanding them helps you position yourself effectively and contribute meaningfully. Leaders set direction and take ownership of outcomes. Followers provide essential implementation, support, and honest feedback. Supporters maintain morale, build consensus, and ensure inclusion. Challengers question assumptions and prevent the kind of groupthink that leads organizations and relationships off cliffs. None of these roles is inherently superior. All are necessary, and the most socially intelligent people can move fluidly between them depending on what the situation actually needs rather than what their ego prefers. The ability to follow skillfully, to actively support. Leadership you trust while maintaining your own judgment and values is as important as the ability to lead. Leaders who have never learned to follow well tend to become the kind of leaders nobody wants to follow. The ability to challenge constructively, to question ideas while supporting people, to push for higher standards without creating defensiveness is arguably the rarest and most valuable skill in any collaborative environment. Developing all of these capabilities, rather than rigidly identifying with one role, gives you genuine flexibility in navigating the full complexity of human groups. Chapter 12. Conflict Psychology and Resolution Mastery. Most people handle conflict poorly, not because they're bad people or because they don't care about resolution, but because they fundamentally misunderstand what conflict actually is. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Conflict is almost never really about what it appears to be about. The argument about budget allocation is actually about feeling respected and heard. The fight about household responsibilities is actually about feeling seen and valued. The workplace dispute about process is actually about autonomy, fairness, or fear of being sidelined. The surface issue is just the arena where a deeper need has chosen to express itself. Until you address the deeper need, you can resolve the surface issue 100 times, and it will keep coming back in different forms. What conflict does to the brain. When conflict escalates, when someone feels criticized, dismissed, or threatened, Their amygdala fires, flooding their system with stress hormones and shutting down access to the prefrontal cortex. Their CEO goes offline. The sophisticated, nuanced, empathetic version of them temporarily leaves the building, and the reactive, defensive, primitive version takes over. This is why people say things in conflict that they later deeply regret. It's not who they are. It's what happens when their nervous system interprets the situation as a survival threat and stops having access to better judgment. Understanding this doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it fundamentally changes how you respond to it. When you can see that the person escalating in front of you is operating from a threatened nervous system rather than their full rational capacity, your response shifts from counter-escalation to de-escalation. And de-escalation is almost always where resolution lives. The most powerful de-escalation tool available to you is your own regulated state. A calm, steady presence during conflict is not passive. It's one of the most active and skillful things you can bring to a difficult situation. Your nervous system regulation literally helps regulate theirs through the emotional contagion mechanisms we explored earlier. Positions versus interests, the most important distinction in conflict resolution. Most conflict resolution gets stuck because everyone is arguing about their positions, the specific solutions they want, rather than exploring their underlying interests, the needs those solutions are meant to address. Positions are zero-sum. If two people want the same thing and there's only one of it, someone has to lose. Conflict at the position level is a fight over a fixed pie. Interests are almost never zero-sum. When you understand what each person actually needs, the value, the recognition, the security, the autonomy, the fairness they're protecting, creative solutions almost always exist that address everyone's core needs, even when the specific positions they started with were completely incompatible. The skill is learning to ask and genuinely listen to the answers to questions that surface interests beneath positions. Help me understand what's most important to you here. What would a good outcome look like for you? Not just what happens, but how it would feel. What are you most concerned about if we don't resolve this? These aren't negotiating tactics. They're genuine inquiries, and the answers they produce make resolution not just possible, but often surprisingly straightforward. The language of non-escalation, the words you choose during conflict, have enormous power to either open or close the possibility of resolution. Accusatory language: you always do this. You never listen. You're being completely unreasonable. Activates defensiveness immediately and reliably. It shifts the focus from the problem to the person's character, which triggers identity-level threat responses that are much harder to de-escalate than interest-level disagreements. Descriptive language, focusing on specific, observable behaviors and their concrete impact, keeps the conversation focused on something that can actually be changed. When the meeting starts without waiting for everyone, I feel like my contribution doesn't matter. And I'm worried I'm missing context that affects my work, is fundamentally different from "you're always disrespectful." One is about a specific behavior and its specific impact. The other is a character assassination that almost no one can hear without becoming defensive. The formula: describe the behavior, name your feeling, explain the impact, is simple enough to remember and powerful enough to transform the tone of almost any difficult conversation. The gift of face-saving. Here's something that conflict resolution training often misses. People can almost never change their position or admit a mistake if doing so requires losing dignity in the process. Face-saving isn't about letting people off the hook. It's about creating the psychological conditions where genuine change becomes possible. When someone can shift their position without it feeling like humiliation or defeat, when there's a graceful path available, they're far more likely to take it. This might mean acknowledging how their original position made sense given what they knew at the time, or focusing on how circumstances have changed rather than who was right or wrong, or finding ways to frame the resolution as something everyone contributed to rather than a victory for one side and a loss for the other. None of this is weakness. It's the craft of resolution. And people who've mastered it resolve conflicts that anyone else would have declared irresolvable. Chapter 13. Building unshakable charisma and magnetic presence. Let's dismantle a myth that's held far too many people back for far too long. Charisma is not something you're born with. It's not a genetic gift distributed unevenly at birth, leaving some people magnetic and everyone else ordinary. Charisma is a learnable integration of specific, identifiable behaviors and mental patterns. And the moment you understand what it actually consists of, you realize it's been within your reach this entire time. The 3 elements of genuine charisma. Every charismatic person you've ever met, every person who seems to walk into a room and immediately shift its energy, who makes you feel genuinely important after 5 minutes of conversation, who can inspire commitment without applying pressure, is operating with some combination of 3 core elements. Presence, the quality of being completely, genuinely here, fully available to this moment, this person, this conversation, rather than performing engagement while actually running internal commentary about yourself. Genuine presence is rare. In a world of constant digital distraction, divided attention, and chronic self-monitoring, someone who is truly, completely with you provides an experience so unusual it feels almost electric. You've felt it. Someone gives you their full, unfiltered attention, and you think, this person actually sees me. That's presence, and it cannot be faked, because the absence of it is also felt immediately. Developing presence requires clearing the internal noise, the self-monitoring, the strategic thinking, the anxiety about how you're being perceived, and redirecting that energy completely outward, toward genuine curiosity about the person in front of you, toward authentic interest in what they're actually saying rather than what you're going to say next. Power. Not power over others, personal power. The calm confidence that comes from knowing your own capabilities, being clear about your own values, and believing in your ability to handle whatever comes. The kind of self-assurance that doesn't need to announce itself because it's simply present in the way you carry yourself, the way you make decisions, the way you take up space without apology. This type of power makes others feel safe rather than threatened, because it's not about diminishing anyone else. It's about being so genuinely secure in your own worth that you have no need to establish it at others' expense. Warmth. The genuine ability to make others feel valued, seen, and cared for. To be actually interested in people. Not strategically interested, not performing interest, but authentically curious about who they are and what matters to them. Warmth is expressed through the quality of your questions, the way you listen, the ease with which you share credit, and acknowledge others' contributions, the generosity with which you invest your attention and energy. And here's what makes warmth so powerful in combination with presence and power. It resolves the potential threat of power entirely. A powerful person without warmth can feel intimidating or cold. Add genuine warmth, and that same power becomes magnetic, because people feel that your capability is in service of them, not just yourself. Storytelling as charismatic expression. One of the most universally present elements in genuinely charismatic people is the ability to tell stories that illuminate their values and create emotional connection. Not fabricated stories designed to impress. Real experiences, including failures, uncertainties, moments of doubt alongside moments of triumph, shared with the kind of honest specificity that makes listeners think, "I've felt that too." That recognition, "I've felt that too," is one of the deepest forms of human connection available. It transforms you from someone speaking at people into someone speaking from the same human experience they're living. The structure of compelling stories is simple. A situation that creates genuine stakes, a moment of genuine difficulty or decision, and a resolution that reveals something true about what you value. You don't need dramatic material, you need authentic material, told with enough specific detail that it feels real rather than constructed. The stories that land hardest are almost never the triumphant ones. They're the honest ones, where you struggled, where you were uncertain, where things didn't go the way you planned. Vulnerability, appropriately calibrated, doesn't diminish charisma. It creates it, sustaining charismatic presence. Over time, charismatic presence requires genuine energy, the kind that can't be manufactured through technique when you're running on empty, which means that energy management is not peripheral to developing charisma. It's central to it. This means treating recovery as seriously as performance. It means building in genuine renewal, not just rest, but activities that actually replenish your enthusiasm, your curiosity, and your sense of purpose. Because charisma is ultimately an overflow phenomenon. It emerges naturally when you're genuinely full, genuinely engaged, genuinely alive in what you're doing. You cannot inspire others sustainably from a place of depletion. You can only give what you genuinely have. Chapter 14. Advanced Conversation Psychology. Every relationship in your life, everyone, lives or dies in conversation, not in grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in the accumulated texture of thousands of ordinary exchanges. How you open conversations, the questions you ask, the quality of your listening, how you handle awkward pauses and difficult topics, whether people leave conversations feeling more seen or less seen than when they arrived. Conversation is the primary medium through which everything in this entire book either happens or doesn't. It's where social awareness gets expressed, where influence operates, where trust is built or eroded, where genuine connection either forms or fails to form. Opening with genuine interest. The first few exchanges of any conversation establish its entire trajectory. And the most reliable way to start powerfully is also the simplest. Be genuinely interested in the person you're talking with, not performing interest, not asking questions because you've been told questions create rapport. Actually wanting to understand something real about who this person is and what matters to them. The questions that open this kind of conversation are different from standard social scripts. Instead of, "What do you do? What are you working on right now that actually excites you?" Instead of, how was your weekend? What's something that's been on your mind lately? These aren't tricks, they're invitations. And people almost universally respond to genuine invitations with genuine openness. The art of conversational threading. Every conversation contains dozens of threads, or small details, passing mentions, brief emotional reactions that offer opportunities to go deeper if you're paying close enough attention to catch them. Someone mentions they've been stressed about a decision they're facing. Someone's voice changes slightly when they talk about a particular project. Someone uses a word or phrase that suggests there's more beneath what they're saying. Threading means picking up those moments and following them, not intrusively, but with genuine curiosity. You mentioned that decision. What's making it difficult? Or simply, tell me more about that. Threading does two things simultaneously. It demonstrates that you're actually listening rather than just waiting for your turn. And it creates the natural depth progression that transforms surface exchanges into meaningful conversations, the kind people remember and want to return to. Listening at multiple levels. Most people listen to the words. Skilled conversationalists listen to everything else simultaneously. They're listening for the emotion beneath the content. What feeling is present in the way something is being said, regardless of what's actually being said. They're listening for what's being avoided, the topic that keeps almost surfacing and then getting redirected. They're listening for what energizes the person, where their voice changes quality, where their engagement lifts, where they lean forward. This kind of listening produces a completely different quality of response than listening only to content, because your response emerges from a much richer, more complete understanding of what's actually happening for the person across from you. Reflective listening, paraphrasing back what you've heard, naming the emotion you've noticed, asking questions that help people clarify their own thinking, serves dual purpose. It confirms your understanding and gives them an experience of being deeply heard that most people never receive. Managing difficult conversations, the conversations that matter most, are almost always the hardest ones. The feedback that needs to be given, the boundary that needs to be set, the misunderstanding that's been allowed to fester, the truth that's been avoided because avoiding it felt easier. The psychological key to all of them is the same. Separate the person from the problem. Your disagreement is with a behavior, a decision, a situation, not with the person's fundamental worth or character. When that distinction is clear in your own mind, it comes through in how you speak, and the other person's defensiveness dramatically reduces. Enter difficult conversations with genuine curiosity rather than a verdict already decided. The most disarming thing you can bring to a tense conversation is honest uncertainty. The willingness to be changed by what you hear, not just confirmed in what you already think. And close, difficult conversations with something forward-looking, not a summary of who was wrong, but an agreement about what comes next. The ending of a conversation determines how it's remembered. Make the ending about possibility rather than judgment. Chapter 15, Creating Deep Trust and Lasting Influence. We've arrived at the foundation beneath all foundations. Everything in this book, every principle, every skill, every framework, ultimately rests on one thing: trust. Without it, social awareness is just surveillance, influence is just manipulation, and charisma is just performance. With it, everything changes. Relationships deepen. Influence becomes effortless. Leadership becomes natural. Trust is not built in dramatic moments. It's built in the accumulation of thousands of ordinary ones. The three dimensions of trustworthiness. Research on trust consistently identifies three core dimensions that people unconsciously assess in anyone they're deciding whether to trust. Ability. Are you actually capable of doing what you say you can do? Do your commitments translate into results? Is your expertise real or performed? Benevolence. Do you actually care about my interests, not just your own? When there's a conflict between what serves you and what serves me, which way do you go? Integrity. Are you the same person in private that you present in public? Do your actions align with your stated values, especially when maintaining that alignment is costly? All three must be present for deep trust to develop. High ability without benevolence makes someone capable but dangerous. High benevolence without ability makes someone well-meaning but unreliable. High ability and benevolence without integrity makes someone likable but ultimately untrustworthy, because you never quite know which version of them you're getting. Building trust across all three dimensions simultaneously is a long game, but it's the only game worth playing. Reliability as the invisible foundation. Of all the behaviors that build trust, the most underrated is also the most mundane. Doing what you said you would do, when you said you would do it, at the quality you committed to, consistently, quietly, without needing credit for it. Reliability signals something that goes far deeper than competence. It signals that you respect others enough to treat your word as binding, that your commitments aren't provisional, that when you say yes, you mean it. Small consistencies in small matters create enormous confidence for large matters. The person who's always on time for minor commitments is trusted with major ones. The person who follows through on minor promises is believed when they make significant ones. And the inverse is equally true. Small inconsistencies in small matters create cumulative doubt that no amount of large, impressive reliability can fully erase. People notice the micro patterns. They always do. The vulnerability paradox. Here's something counterintuitive that the research on trust supports clearly. Showing appropriate vulnerability increases others' confidence in you, rather than diminishing it. When you admit uncertainty, acknowledge mistakes, share challenges you've navigated, you communicate something essential, that you're secure enough to be honest and honest enough to be trusted. The person who maintains a perfect facade of infallibility triggers something uncomfortable in observers, a sense that they're not quite real, that they're managing rather than relating, that the relationship is with a performance rather than a person. The person who can say, "I don't know, I got that wrong, this is harder than I expected," while maintaining their fundamental groundedness and confidence, creates genuine connection, because that kind of honesty is rare, and rare things are valuable. Vulnerability must be calibrated, of course. The goal isn't to unload every insecurity and doubt onto everyone you meet. It's to be appropriately honest about your humanity, sharing challenges you've navigated, admitting limits of your knowledge, acknowledging mistakes with what you've learned from them, in proportion to the depth of the relationship and the requirements of the moment. Repairing trust when it breaks. At some point, despite your best intentions and consistent effort, you will break someone's trust through a mistake, a misjudgment, a failure to follow through, or simply a moment where your worst self showed up instead of your best. What you do in that moment defines your character more clearly than anything you've done before. Effective trust repair requires 4 things in sequence. Genuine acknowledgement of what happened without minimization or deflection. Full accountability without the quiet addition of justifications that transfer some of the blame. Demonstrated understanding of the specific impact on the other person, not just the abstract fact that trust was damaged, but how it felt for them. And a concrete, specific commitment to what will be different going forward, not a vague promise to do better, but a real plan with real accountability. What trust repair never includes, rushing the timeline. Once trust is damaged, rebuilding it takes longer than it took to establish originally. That's not unfair. It's appropriate. The other person needs enough evidence of consistent change to update their mental model of who you are. That evidence accumulates through time and behavior. It cannot be compressed by earnest intention alone. The compound effect of a trustworthy reputation. Here's what happens when you build trust consistently across years and relationships. Your reputation begins to precede you. People who've never met you begin interactions already predisposed to trust you because someone they trust has told them about your character. The social proof of your trustworthiness travels ahead of you into every new relationship, creating a foundation of goodwill that makes everything easier, every connection warmer, every influence more natural. This is the compound effect of character. Small, consistent deposits of reliability, honesty, and genuine care for others, made day after day, year after year, accumulate into a form of social capital that becomes genuinely powerful. Not because you've accumulated it strategically, but because you've lived in a way that made its accumulation inevitable. What all of this is really about, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground together. The hidden psychology behind every interaction, how your social brain actually works, the 4 pillars of social intelligence, personality patterns, first impressions, microexpressions, body language, vocal psychology, influence and persuasion, emotional contagion, power dynamics, conflict resolution, charisma, conversation mastery, deep trust. But here's what I want you to take away from all of it. The single idea that ties everything together. All of this knowledge, every principle and framework and skill exists in service of one thing: becoming someone who makes other people's lives genuinely better through the simple act of being in their presence. Not more impressive, not more powerful, not more strategic, more real, more attuned, more genuinely interested in the people across from you, more capable of seeing them clearly, hearing them deeply, and responding to what's actually there rather than what you assume or project. The most socially intelligent people you've ever encountered weren't remarkable because they had perfect technique. They were remarkable because they'd done the deep work of understanding themselves and others well enough to show up authentically in every interaction, bringing genuine presence, genuine warmth, genuine competence, and genuine care. That's what's available to you, not someday, starting with the very next conversation you have. Go make it count.